Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share the show with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. But before we begin, as a reminder, Play Noir is coming back. So if you've got a film noir style one-act play and you'd like to submit it for our 2025 season, visit punkmonkeyproductions.com for guidelines and specifications. Or if you already have one under your belt, please submit it to info@punkmonkeyproductions.com. If you're not familiar with the style, pick up a copy of Play Noir Anthology, 41 film noir style one-act plays written from playwrights from around the world. It's available on Amazon. You can also pick it up at Barnes & Noble, well, at least on the website, and walmart.com as well. My guest today is a playwright and comedian. Her solo show, Lady Macbeth and her pal Megan, played at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and won the audience pick of the Fringe at the Cincinnati Fringe Festival. Her play, Bad Panda, is published by Original Works Publishing and was translated into Spanish for a 5-month run at Del Teatro. My Spanish is terrible, so forgive me. Del Teatro Milan in Mexico City. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution listed her solo show, Hillary Clinton Got Me Pregnant, in their yearly top 10 best plays. Her musical drama, Love, Jerry, was produced in the New York Musical Theater Festival, where it won 3 Talkin Broadway Citations and 4 NYMF Excellence Awards, including Excellence in Writing. She was a Playwright Center Jerome Fellow, a WordBRIDGE alum, and earned her MFA in playwriting from the University of Texas at Austin. She currently teaches playwriting at the University of Iowa and is a regularly returning visiting faculty for the Playwrights Lab at Hollins University. Her latest piece, Feast, is a reimagining the story of Beowulf, which opened on March 8th at the Count's Den in downtown Los Angeles and runs through April 6th. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Megan Gogerty.
Yay! Thanks, James.
Thank you. I've got 2 questions. I want to start this off right off the bat for things that popped into my head, which I didn't mention in the bio, but this retelling is a one-woman show. Why take that approach instead of just a stage version of Beowulf with all the characters that might, be present?
Well, it was my original idea that it was going to be a 2-hander. Okay. I had this idea that it was going to be a courtroom with Grendel's mother on one side and Beowulf on the other. I just could never get Beowulf on the stage. Once Grendel's mother took the mic, that was it. She was off to the races, and I was just trying to keep up.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, well, I think, I don't know why that is. Who knows? That's a mystery. I don't know. I can't explain it. I don't know how you are, James, but, I really struggle with deciding what the play is before I write the play. Like, the play has to tell me what it is. I don't know what it is. And sometimes people are like, Megan, why don't you write a comedy? Or why don't you write a rom-com? Or why don't you write, this kind or that kind? And I would love to be the kind of writer that was like, I'm going to write a historical drama about blah. I just can't do it. The play's going to be what the play's going to be, and my job is to just let the play unfold how it unfolds.
It's interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I've got it behind me, the Playwright's Guidebook. It's Stuart Spencer, and he kind of touches on that. It's like, well, the play's not going the way that I want it to. And I think it's been a while since I've read it, but his thing is like, well, maybe that's not the play that you need to write. You want it to go a certain way, but you just need to accept that the play is going to tell you where it wants to go, and that you have to accept that. Is that the case with you?
Yeah, I mean, this is an old metaphor, but I think it's really apt to think about plays like children. Like, yeah, you want your kid to go to medical school, but they're going to be a dancer. And, that's it. At a certain point, you have to kind of let them be what they are. And I have found that the plays that are hardest for me to write are the ones where I'm trying to assert my will. And the ones that come out the quickest are the ones where I get out of the way and let the play be itself. Revising is really, for me, the art of allowing the play to be more fully and truly itself. Right. So that's what that process is. And a play is done for me when I feel like I can't revise it more truly, like it is true. And I mean true, like a plumb line. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like,
when did you do you still accept that, or do you still fight it, or just like it's just like I gave up a long time ago. I want to go this direction, but I've realized that I can't, and it's going to be what it is.
Yeah,
or do you still like, curse you, muses or whoever it is. It's like,
sometimes I find myself tripped up. I'm like, oh man, am I doing this again? Am I getting in the way of the play again? But I knock on wood, I like to think that I'm getting a little bit better at noticing and listening, just trying to get out of the way of the play.
Do you find, is it because of you get into a flow state and you just have to accept it? Is that what it is? It's just like,
yeah. Or like, I'll give you an example. I was working on a show a few years ago, and I kept writing this scene about the movie Singing in the Rain. And then I would sit down with my dramaturg, and they're like, what's this scene? And I'm like, I don't know. And I'd cut it. This scene, I don't want it. It doesn't make any sense. Dramaturg, you're so logical. You figured it out. No, I don't need it. And then it would kind of creep back into the next draft. And I'd be like, what's this scene doing here? And I'd cut it. And we did this 3 or 4 more rounds until finally I was like, maybe there's something here that I need to pay attention to. Like, why does this scene want to be in the play? And once I figured that out, it unlocked a big chunk of the play for me. I just feel like, I'm not that bright. I have to, you know what I'm saying? Like, my logic brain moves really slow like a turtle, and my intuition goes a lot faster. So if I can just get out of the way, it works better. How
important do you think that is, the intuition aspect? I mean, is that like I don't want to say the biggest piece of advice that you could give a playwright starting out, but like, just like.
Yeah, well, I think it is so crucial and so fundamental that I think most writers don't even have to work on it. Like if you're a writer, if you're a person who has to write, right? There's something in you. There's something. Right. Martha Graham talks about the queer dissatisfaction of the artist. Sure. Like there's something, you're never satisfied. There's something in you. There's some grit, some little gristle that you just have to, you have to get out. And that is sometimes hard to live with, I think, but ultimately the engine. It is the engine, because the thing about being a playwright, right, is that the awards only matter until the day after you get the award, and the commission only matters until the day after you, right? Like the accolades and the praise, the reviews, all of that, it matters a lot until you get it, and then it ceases to matter, right? Nothing external matters. Nothing external matters. What matters is inside, right? And that quest, that need, that compulsion to get it out, to express the thing that you've got to express, to drive through that question that you are wrestling with, right? That's what matters. And then everything else, like if people like my play or don't like my play, on a certain level, it's none of my business. It's got to be what it's got to be.
You, going with the intuition, I'm going to assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, do you not because of that, do you not outline?
Here's what I will say about that. I imagine going on a road trip, right? There are some people who get out the map and they're like, okay, I'm going to take a rest stop at this spot, and I'm going to take a lunch at this spot, and they map out their whole route and they know every little thing about it, right? Mm-hmm. That's not how I work. I do, however, like to know if I'm driving to California. I like to know what direction I'm going in, and then I will go in that direction and feel my way through to that direction. And then that means sometimes I have to take little side journeys, and sometimes I make discoveries along the way. Sometimes I get my car in a ditch and I have to back up and go up. But as long as I have a sort of a general idea of like, I'm going this way, that's how I proceed. So
does that mean you start off with a premise, or that you know what the story is, and then I'm just going to sit down and go?
Yeah,
I want to get in the car.
Plays start for me, usually there's a friction of two ideas. One idea isn't enough for me to write a play. I have to have two ideas.
About the same story or two different things, and you just have to figure out which one you want to do?
Two ideas that collide and then become the play.
Oh. Okay.
Right? So let's talk about Feast as an example. So the two ideas for that, for me, was our national moment and how I was really despairing and full of grief. And I found myself wanting, just sort of really yearning for, I want a wise, magical woman who's very old to appear and tell me what to do. So I had this like, I want that. I want that. Somebody come tell me what to do, because I don't know what to do in this moment, right? I had that. So that was one idea. And then the other idea that crashed into that idea was the Beowulf myth, right? So those two things kind of came together, and it's like, oh, I see where the play can go, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Now, in a more reality-based question, did the wise magical woman that you were asking for solve your dilemma, your real life dilemma, when you wrote this play?
Well, I don't know. It might be too much to ask of her, but I feel like, you know how sometimes you will read plays and some people have the answer and they're like, this is the answer. I've never had the answer. And I really envy people who have the answer. I think that must be, you must sleep really well at night to know what the answer is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is. I just know what the question is. And for me, I write a play because I'm wrestling with a question. And through the writing of the play, I get to some sort of resolution, which is not to say I answer the question, but I get through that gristle to the other side, right? So one of the questions that I was wrestling with in Feast is like, what power do I have? What can I do in the face of rising authoritarianism? Like, what do we do? Right? I don't know what the answer to that is, but that was the question that I was wrestling with. And through that wrestling, found this catharsis and found this sort of new place from which to, authoritarianism doesn't end when you see my play.
Sure.
Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be amazing? I would love that, but that's not what happens. So it doesn't sort of solve the problem, but it does kind of express that grief and anxiety and dread and fear that I think is very much with us. And through the expressing of that and through the catharsis of that, we kind of get through the other side and can see things a little differently and feel, I think, maybe more empowered.
Okay. So I'm going to give away a little something from our intro, because when this actually drops, your play will have opened, but congratulations on your opening night, which is actually tonight. So the other thing that stood out to me with this play is it's a one woman show that's premiering in downtown Los Angeles, but you're not in it.
Well, I was in it.
Right. So, but that's my thing. It's like, so traditionally, in my experience, and this is my ignorance or naivete in this regard, is that usually one person shows are written for that particular playwright who wrote it.
Yeah. And
then it doesn't seem like it ever sees the light of day after that, which has always been my beef about one person shows. It's like, oh, this is my opportunity to write something for myself and showcase my talents. So I want to unpack that, because this is in my mind and limited experience as far as one person show goes, that this doesn't usually happen this way. That how did it get out there to where it's being performed by other solo performers? And maybe that's just,
So my specialty over the last 10 years or so have been one-woman shows. That's mostly what I've been doing. And part of that sort of arose out of necessity. It's just what
Okay.
you're talking about. I was living in Iowa City, which is where I live today, teaching at the university, and I felt like I was a playwright via correspondence.
Okay.
I would send my plays out and they would get done all these different places, and the theater may or may not be able to fly me in. And if they could fly me in, they'd fly me in for opening night when the rehearsal's done and everything's done. And so there's really sort of nothing for me to say or contribute to that process, right? Like I come in and I'm like, oh, that's not how I would have done it, but good job, everybody. Like it's open. Like, what am I
Right.
going to do?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
right? I'm going to be a jerk and be like, you did it all wrong. Like, no, I'm going to be like, well, good job. Like, hooray. And so it was like, I felt like I was a party planner who never got to go to the party, you
Mm.
know? And so, then one night at my home theater did an evening of monologues, and they asked me to do one, and I did one, and I was at that point, I was like, I'm not performing. I'm the writer. I don't want to perform. I was over it. Performing was behind me, beneath me, beyond me. I'm doing something else. But I got up on the stage to do my monologue, and it just so happened that I got up stage 11 days after giving birth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I was up there and I'm just wearing a potato sack, and like I've just gone through this thing and I thought, well, I can't perform like this. But then I got up there and it felt like lightning. Like suddenly I was in the room and suddenly it was happening, right? All the stuff that I've been planning theoretically for other things happened. Now there was nothing between me and the audience, right? I could just directly plug in. And that was so liberating and exhilarating. And I thought this is the way that I should be making theater right now while I'm in Iowa City, which is a great community, a lovely town for writers, but sort of a smaller community for theater, certainly. And I thought this is what I'm going to do because this is what's really feeding me. So I started doing solo work with not particularly any expectation that anybody would do it, but other than me. But a couple of my shows have gotten done by other folk. A couple of them get done at, festivals and, other things and fringe shows here and there, which is kind of great. But those actors are playing a character who is conveniently named Megan Gogerty, right? And when I was writing those solo shows, I was thinking about it as a character named Megan Gogerty, right? So you're not reading pages of my diary. This is very much a play. I'm a playwright, and I have this sort of semi-autobiographical character, right? That is sort of in the start of the show. So that's what I was doing primarily, and I wrote, I don't know, about four plays like that. And then with Feast, I was so sick of me, James. I don't know if you ever get sick yourself. I was just so sick of me.
I'm sick of myself every day.
I'm like, I don't got nothing to say. There's nothing. I'm tired of the game. I'm tired of playing Megan Gogerty. I don't want to do that anymore. And so I wrote this play, and I didn't think that I was going to play it. Actually, I thought this is going to need somebody who's a better actor because I'm okay. I got some good comic timing, but I'm not like a great actor. But I wrote it. So I was writing it thinking other people were going to do it, right? It was going to be my two-hander. It was going to be other actors. But as I wrote it, it was just like, there's so much blood on that page. Like there's so much of my pain in the play that my longtime director, she directed a number of my plays, Saffron Henke. She's a professor at Colorado State. And she was like, Megan, you got to do this play. You got to do it at least once, and then we can have other people do it. And I was like, okay. And so we did it here in my home theater in Iowa City. And it was life-changing for me. It was really hard and electrifying, and I learned a lot, but it was also really, really gripping and exciting.
Sure.
But then when it was over, I was like, I never need to do that again. I never need to do like that. This might be the best play I've ever written, but I never need to do it. Somebody else needs to do it who's a better actor than me. So it got passed around, and then it's the first production that wasn't me. was in Cincinnati at the No Theater. They were all set to do this play. They had this, it's a great play if you've got a humdinger of an actor who's a woman over 40 and she's tired of playing the nurse. Do you know what I mean? Like you've got somebody who can handle some verse and some language. And so they had this fantastic actor and they're like, we're going to do it for her. And then the pandemic shut everything down. And they said, can you do a version of this play? Can you rewrite it so that it can be virtual? Because, it's a dinner party. And I was like, yes, I can. So I wrote a virtual version for them. And that version got done a few times during the pandemic at various places. And it just sort of picked up steam. And then I got connected with Walking Shadow Theater in Minneapolis. And the artistic director of Walking Shadow, a wonderful, wonderful man named John Heimbush, he does a one-man show written by playwright Charlie Bethel, but he performs it about Beowulf. And so he had heard, he's like, I have a Beowulf play. And I was like, I have a Grendel's Mother play. And he's like, amazing. So they ended up doing that show. They ended up doing Feast because they had this Beowulf connection. And then that sold so well. They had an incredible actor, Isabel Nelson played the role. She's amazing. And that sold so well that they sold out. And so they did a remounted version and that sold out. So, and it was through that I found the LA folks found me and they hooked up and they were like, we want to do this play. And I was like, please do it. So it's the West Coast premiere and it looks amazing.
Congrats. That's awesome.
It's kind of a long way around the barn to answer your question, but why I'm not in it.
Not at all. So are there multiple characters or just the one character? Is just the one actress playing playing the one character and it just, does that make it? And when I ask this, it's not coming from a place of insult.
Yeah.
Is it kind of just in a way, just a long monologue then?
She's talking to you.
Okay.
You are in the audience and she sees you and you see her. It is happening right now. She's thrown a dinner party for you and you have come. And so she is talking to you. And so the dramatic action that's happening, it's not imaginary. It's not like, let's all pretend we're in Victorian France. Like that's not what's happening, right? There's no, it is, March 8th, 2025. And you are here in this theater. You have come here. I have invited you. You are here. And I am here as your host. And I'm throwing you this dinner party. While you're here, we're going to have a Truth and Reconciliation Committee about the fact that your people killed my people.
Okay. Wow.
And we're going to get to the bottom of this and but then her plan goes awry, right? Because as she is essentially putting humanity on trial, and I imagine, she's been floating around as a magic dust, for millennia, sort of planning her revenge. And so, she has these talking points that she's worked on forever. She's like leaning into it. But as she is telling the story and as she is sort of making her points, she's making discoveries because she can read the minds of the audience that is with her. And they are teaching her about humanity. And anyway, so it doesn't unfold the way that she thought it was going to unfold.
Okay. So if I'm heard correctly, you've got 5 one-person shows under your belt?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
I can count them up for you. But
have you written other multi-character shows?
Yeah, for sure.
And there's the reason why I'm asking, not that there's a bad thing about just, sticking to, what you're good at. Is there a difference in structure when it comes to writing a multi-character show opposed to writing a one-person show?
Yes.
Okay. Can we unpack that? Because this is an aspect of playwriting that we've not gotten into as far as structure goes. Because and I hate to use this analogy, but when it comes to like film and television, or film mostly, like if you take the Save the Cat, this needs to happen at this point, this happens at this point in this page. And then, so what's the difference when you're right? How's the revelation? How are things revealed in a one-person show opposed to a multi-character show?
Yeah. Here's the primary difference. And it's less a difference, frankly, than a heightening, right? The most important thing in a solo show, as far as I'm concerned, is that your scene partner is the audience. Right. So unlike, say, a typical American realist play where you have, like, I'm in rehearsals right now for a play called Lifespan of a Fact, Lifespan of a Fact, written by like a team of people. But it's it was on Broadway, and it's a typical American realist play, and it's great. I really love it. But in a play, there's a fourth wall, and it's like watching a tennis match, right? You have these two characters and they're fighting.
Sure.
Right. There's three characters, but they're wrestling over a problem. Right. And we're watching the tennis match. Right. But in a solo show, it doesn't go like this. It goes like this. Do you know what I'm saying? It doesn't go side to side. It goes front and back. Right. So I am talking to you in the audience, and you just happen to not have any lines. But I have come to the room. But this is the key. I have come to you not because I have anything to tell you. I have come because I have something to ask of you. I have a problem and I can't solve it by myself, right? I need your help. I need you to help me solve this problem, right? So a great example of this that's not a Megan Gogerty play, and it's not a solo show, but it's structured like a solo show, is Heidi Schreck's What the Constitution Means to Me. Like that's not there are multiple actors in that play, but it is structured like a solo show in that she comes out and she's like, I'm here, but she's not here to tell us, I know what the answer is. She's here because she's like, I have a question. I have a problem, which is, I don't know what the Constitution means to me. I don't know if we should have a Constitution or not. And I need your help in deciding that, right? And that play really makes that question explicit. I don't know if you know it, James, but it makes it really explicit. There's a great video of it on Amazon Prime. That's with Heidi in it. It's extraordinary. But in the last sort of third, the last section becomes a literal debate with the audience weighing in about whether or not we should keep the Constitution, right? So it's making that question really explicit. But that is the difference. And I would argue that even in an American realist play, even in the tennis match play, right? What the audience is experiencing, the journey that the audience goes on, is the play. It's not what the characters are doing. It's what the audience is doing that makes the play interesting. It makes the audience, feel satisfied and feel transformed when they come out, right? So that interplay is happening, I think, with all plays between performer and audience. It's just with the solo show, it's explicit, because without the audience, you got nothing.
Well, I think that's the case in any theatrical piece when it comes to live theater. Now, that being said, when you're the main character, if you will, what is the audience actually responding?
Well, not out loud, although sometimes they do.
Okay, that's why I'm asking, because you're saying the audience is the other character in the piece.
Yeah.
So when you're, how does it, because again, your performance is based on what the other actor gives you in a traditional piece.
Yeah.
Now, how does that come into play for a one-person show where the audience is the quote-unquote other character? Yeah. Where I would say it's still a tennis match. Maybe it's more table tennis in this regard. I don't know. But there's a back and forth, but I don't know if it's hopefully no response, because I don't know, sometimes.
Well, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I think you get where I'm going with this. So.
I do. One of the things that really informs me as a writer is my experience with stand-up comedy. Okay, and stand-up comedy, what's the difference between a play and a stand-up special or a stand-up show? And the difference is it's happening right now, right? Stand-up, one of the things about stand-up that makes it so great, and also makes it so terrible when it's going poorly, is that it's happening right now. Like, we're not all pretending that we're somewhere else. Yeah. It's happening right now. I can see you, you can see me, the waiter dropped a tray, you're not laughing at that joke, okay, right? Like, it's happening right now. And you don't have any lines, all right? I have the jokes, you have the response to the jokes, whether that's painful silence, whether that's uproarious laughter, right? And you could, depending on the comedian, some comedians like to do a lot of crowd work. I don't know a lot of comedians though that like interruptions. I don't know any comedian that's like, I'd like some more hecklers, please. Right? Like
Yeah.
there is a compact, right? Like comedians expect the audience to not interrupt them necessarily, but to respond, right? We want you to respond, but not interrupt, right? Like that's how stand-up works, right? Well, that idea, especially with a play like Feast is happening in the room, like stand-up. It's happening right now. I can see you, you can see me, and I expect you to respond, and you will respond, right? Even if it's not the same style of response as in a stand-up show. Feast has a lot of funny lines. It's pretty funny, but it's not a laugh riot. I mean, there's also blood and gore and murder, right? Like, so it's
As
not...
stand-up is, or at all theater.
Yeah, so it's pretty grisly. But audiences are responding, right? So as a performer, like you can tell when everyone is holding their breath at the same time, right? You can tell when people are shifting in their seats uncomfortably, and you can tell when you got them, right? You can tell when you got them in your hand, and when you don't got them, you can tell.
Sure. So let me ask you this, because obviously you have experience in both arenas. So when it comes to these one-person shows, if you do get that response from the audience, whether that's verbal or do you respond in kind, if that makes sense? Do you acknowledge it, and does that mean all of a sudden I'm going to ad-lib this moment before I go to the next part, or do I ignore what the audience how the audience just responded?
Yeah.
Or do you give that double take or that look like?
Well, you can't ignore it, right? You can't ignore it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it does happen even in a traditional piece where it's just
Sure.
I'm going to break the fourth wall here for a second, just because, which
you can't
some
ignore
people
it.
hate and some people love.
But there is a wonderful performance artist named Taylor Mack, and Taylor has an essay where they argue, they came up out of sort of the queer cabaret scene, and they talk about incorporating calamity, where if you're performing and like a couple is breaking up at a table, and causing a big scene, you can't ignore it because now they're the show. So instead you have to incorporate that calamity, and now you're all in the show together. You have to incorporate calamity.
And you hence save the relationship at the end.
Yeah, maybe, or participate. But the audience is going to be paying attention to that anyway. So if you're the performer, you have to incorporate that so that you keep the audience's attention with you. In theater, I think most audience members understand that they shouldn't interrupt. Right? I think that most audience members go to the theater. In fact, a lot of audience members are like, don't talk to me. Like nobody. I don't want to be on stage. Right? And nobody is on stage in Feast, but they go in sort of understanding sort of what the rules of the game are. That said, every once in a while, especially in Feast, when I would perform Feast, I had to be very careful not to make eye contact with certain people when I was asking certain questions. There were certain rhetorical questions. I had to make sure I'm not making eye contact with somebody when I asked that question, or they would answer it. Especially, and this is just my observation, especially if they were a white man over 50, they would sometimes feel like they should answer the question that I'm asking them. And I'm like, I'm not actually asking you, sir. And so I would have to just sort of be prepared. But one of the things that, I learned doing the show is like, I need to make sure that if I'm not looking at if I'm not looking you directly in the eye, right, then that can resolve itself a little bit. But that's the fun of live theater, right? Is you don't know what the people are going to do. Well,
it's the interesting thing about that. I'm going to follow up that statement, because while you were saying that, it was just that there's nobody on stage with you. It's like, how interesting would this piece be if there were people, if there were a handful? Like, I don't know how many people are at the table.
Yeah.
In the actual, but to say, hey, look, for 8 of you, you're actually going to be on stage.
Well, that's actually how we did it.
Oh, really?
In the original production. Yeah.
Okay.
The show was done in the round.
Okay,
but
great.
You could, there were these sort of 2 tables that were sort of set up runway style, so I could kind of walk in between them. And those were, if you wanted, you could have a special, and you'd sit at the table and you would have a plate of like discarded chicken bones as if you had just eaten,
Well,
and
that's disappointing.
yeah, and
Have the meal.
yeah, well, a lot of people, it was hard to get them to eat. And so
Sure.
one of the things that happens in the play is that the host serves dessert, serves cookies.
Oh.
And I would come out and I'd serve these cookies, and the people wouldn't eat them. They were like, I don't want to eat it, because they were on stage to get really so good. So I had to coax them into eating them. And there's like a whole section, which I've now put into the play, of like, go ahead, eat your, like, here comes the airplane. Like, here we go. You got to eat your cookie. And then like one or two, they would nibble the cookie. And once they nibble the cookie, I got them. Because if one person eats the cookie, the whole audience has sort of metaphorically eaten the cookie. And now we're all in. And when you eat the cookie, you are now complicit in the rest of the play.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So are those quote unquote seats, if you will, is that quote unquote role voluntary?
Yeah.
Or those, okay.
Oh, for sure.
You go back, it's like, oh, the biggest, everybody's biggest fear is, is public speaking. So in a way, it's kind of like that. So, oh my God, I'm on stage and everybody's watching me, for people who aren't used to that. So that's interesting.
Yeah, you have to want to. In fact, one night I was doing the show and the stage manager got on a headset and was like, there's a 7-year-old at the table. And I was like, absolutely not. I can't possibly. You're going to have to, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to reseat them, because I can't do this play if there's a 7-year-old at the table. Like, I can't talk about the death and murder and the dismemberment of bodies.
Hey, buddy, guess what?
7-year-old. And so they moved the 7-year-old, and the mom was cool with it. And, the 7-year-old was on his iPad the whole time, and it was fine.
That's hilarious.
But I was like, woo, I don't know.
A little while back, you said something about verse. Is this written in verse?
Yeah, it's in blank verse. Yeah.
Blank verse. What is blank verse?
It's verse that only rhymes sometimes and sporadically, but has a sort of a lilting cadence to it.
Okay, but
that's how I define blank verse.
I'm imagining there's still a cadence and rhythm to it if it's in verse.
Yeah.
And I don't want to bring up the usual iambic pentameter.
I'm not smart enough for iambic pentameter.
but that's the one that everybody knows. So is there a rhythm that you're writing in, and
there's not a formal rhythm. Like, I didn't sit down and go da 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 da.
Sure.
Da 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 da. But there is a sort of an almost like an incantation quality to some of the parts of the play. Okay. Like, and then sometimes there'll be like a surprising rhyme, right? Which
is it noticeable? Does it stand out, or just like, do you not?
I think it resonates.
Okay.
I think it resonates like a like gong, like, oh. But she is speaking in this heightened language. She speaks in this heightened, poetical language that's about, and part of that's because, Beowulf's a poem, right? Like, Beowulf has the big heightened language, has that Gothic, Lord of the Rings style,
Sure.
high fantasy kind of speech. And there's that in there, but it's like talking about the grocery store,
right.
Like speech like that. But it's like, she talks about the difference between vengeance and justice. And she's like, I don't know what justice is. I only know vengeance. And she says that it must be vengeance wrapped in saran, right? So like that kind of using like contemporary stuff like saran wrap in the grocery store to kind of, but in a heightened way.
So on that note, is this a modern day retelling?
Oh yeah, it's happening right now.
Okay, got it. When you said right now, I'm just thinking like, hey, we're at this period of time.
No, it's happening in 2025.
Okay, got it. Copy, understood. Okay.
Yeah.
And embarrassingly enough, forgive me, audience. This is one of the, there were a lot of things assigned at high school. This is one that I was never assigned, and it's one I still haven't read. There were only 2 books. Although I read some plays in high school, don't get me wrong, but there were only 2 books that were assigned in high school that I read. One was To Kill a Mockingbird, and the other one was Catcher in the Rye. So all the traditional stuff. I mean, I've gone back and not that this is, sorry, guys, we're going off a little tangent about literature. I was never assigned Brave New World. I was never assigned 1984, never assigned Beowulf, Don Quixote, all of them. And I've tried to go back and read some of them, but and Beowulf's not, and now I'm fascinated. This is going to have to be one that I'm going to have to sit back and pick up and then look at your piece as well.
Yeah. The good news is you don't have to know Beowulf to get the play.
Oh, well, fair enough.
Yeah. So I wrote it assuming my audience would either not know or not remember Beowulf. And in fact, in its premiere, when we premiered it, we made the decision not to tell anybody that it was a Beowulf adaptation and let them discover it, which is not really a decision that any theater can make that has to market the show. But because Iowa City is such a small town and everybody here knows me, I'm a kind of a local celebrity. People would buy a ticket even if they didn't know what the play was about.
Sure.
So we were able to not tell them. And so then there was a wonderful moment when you finally realize what she's talking about and the penny would drop in the audience go, oh, right. Because it's full of English professors and writers workshop people, right?
Oh,
so they're like, ooh. Yeah. But you don't have to know Beowulf.
No, I don't think that's an important. I mean, sure, that might be a great marketing technique. So like, hey, look, it's a retelling, but I don't think that's important. I think the story, no matter where it's inspired from, it doesn't matter. Couple other questions, real quick. Actor first or playwright first?
Me?
Yeah.
Playwright, 100%.
Really?
100% playwright.
Interesting. I would have thought it was the opposite because just the way that you talked, that it was just like, I'm going to write this, not for me, I'm not going to, but yet so this is, I'm really fascinated by this because usually it's the opposite. Usually it's like, and again, we've gotten into this, forgive me, audience. I know you've heard this a zillion times if you listen to this podcast in the past, because usually, and this, especially in LA theater, it's like, oh, I'm an actor, so I'm going to write my own. And that's why LA theater's got such a bad rep, in my opinion, is that I'm an actor and I need to showcase my talents. So I'm going to write something for myself and I'm going to direct it. I'm going to produce it.
Right.
And that's usually the route that I'm more familiar with, but I've never, I don't think I've ever met a playwright that wrote something and then happened to perform it.
Yeah.
So that
when I was 18, acting was the gateway drug, right?
Sure.
But I always knew I wanted to be a playwright. I mean, always knew. And so I would act here and there, but really it was just biding my time till I figured out how to write plays.
But you weren't writing for yourself, I imagine.
No, I wasn't until I was, right? Like then I was. I found myself in a situation. I had given up acting, when I was young, and I'm real young, right? Like just graduated from college, and I was doing a little acting, but not really. Like I was acting like I was in a friend's play. Like a friend asked me to be in a play, and I was like, I'll do it as a favor to my friend. And then through that, I got an agent, and then I was doing some stand-up, which is kind of performative. But really, it was all kind of like marking time while I figured out how, and then go home and write plays. Like I am a playwright to the core. And I keep thinking I'm done with performing. I keep thinking that's it. I'm done. I don't want to do on stage anymore. I'm just going to write plays. And then stuff keeps happening that keeps bringing me on stage.
Okay.
So, and stand-up is part of that, I think,
Sure. Yeah. 100%.
The stand-up gets me on stage, but I am a writer before anything.
No, and when I say that, I guess I misphrased that. What happened first? Which one came first? Performing on stage or playwriting? Like you started writing plays before you started acting?
Well, I knew I wanted to be a writer.
Okay.
When I learned how to write.
Got it.
But it didn't occur to me to be a playwright. I grew up in, working class neighborhood in Iowa. And I figured all the playwrights were dead. I thought all the plays were written and all the playwrights were dead. Like it just didn't occur to me. We didn't have local new play theater scene where I was growing up, right? And so I thought, well, I'm going to be a writer, but I don't, am I going to write novels? Am I going to write short stories? Like I know I'm going to be a writer. And then when I was in high school, our local university did a thespian festival. I don't know if you have thespian festivals in LA, but it's a thespian society. It's for like teenagers. And
I
they
think
would come
that's
and
what it is. Usually teenagers and maybe
yeah,
some college students, but I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's and so they did this stuff for high school, all the high school kids about, we're going to do an acting workshop or we're going to do a costume workshop. And they had a playwriting workshop. And I went, and by twist of fate, I was the only person who went to the playwriting workshop. And I had this intense experience with the playwriting instructor, who then years later, became a dear friend of mine. His name's Todd Ristaw. Shout out to Todd. Hi, Toddy. And we became dear friends. But it was the first time I'd met a playwright. And it was the first time I understood what playwriting was that afternoon. And I walked into that, I was like 16. I walked into that room, playwright curious, and I walked out going, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Nice.
Yeah.
So let's talk about smaller markets.
Great.
And what I mean by that, obviously, you know what I mean by that, but I want to talk about, like, I think that, do you think these days, maybe it was different 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that you had to be in New York or Chicago, maybe LA, to really make it? And I don't know if I'm not quite sure if people that want to write theater really understand the benefits and embrace that those smaller markets, wherever they might live, are really great opportunities to.
It's a trade-off, James.
Okay.
It's a trade-off. Because I lived in LA, I lived in Chicago, I lived in Minneapolis, I lived in these bigger markets. But here's what I get for living in Iowa City. What I get is, let me put it another way. So much of my career as a playwright, my relationship with theaters and producers has been widget based, where I go, I'm selling these widgets. Do any of these widgets fit your season that you're building? Do you want to buy my widgets? And they go, yes, I want to buy your widget, or no, I don't want to buy your widget. And there's no real relationship there that's not transactional. Even if I like them personally, even if they like me personally, they're out here to solve a problem. They're looking for widgets. I either have a widget that solves a problem or I don't, right? And there's not a relationship there. And what I get here in Iowa City is I have a home theater, Riverside Theater, which is part of the National New Play Network. Like, it's a regional theater, small, but it's a theater. They're my home theater. And I can come to them and I have a relationship with them. And I say, I have a play and it's half baked. And they're like, when do you want to open it? and I say, I have a play, but I just need a reading. And they're like, great, let's do it. Is April good for you? Like, we have a relationship with one another, right? And I am, it's not transactional and then I'm selling a widget, but also they know they can count on me as a voice in the community. I was the honorary chair of their capital campaign, and they know that I will make, advertising videos for them. And they know that I will, I'm acting in this play for them. They're like, we really want you to do it. And I'm like, I don't really act. And they're like, please. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to do Lifespan of the Fact for them. Like, we have a relationship that is very much about the artists and not the widgets. Right. And I'm able, and I know that other people are, if you live in a large market and you are blessed to have that kind of relationship with the theater, that's wonderful. But I struggled in those larger markets to find that relationship, because that relationship is expensive. Let's be real,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
It's really expensive. And a lot of times people, form theater companies or what have you, not necessarily to have a relationship with you. They have a relationship with their own people. So for me, when I moved from LA to Iowa City, and I wondered when I was doing that, I thought, am I committing career suicide? Like, is this going to be the end? Is anyone ever going to hear from me? Because our career, as you know, James, right? Our career is really about relationships. right? This is the way that a playwright builds their career. It's really who you know. And I don't mean that in a smarmy, here's my business card way. I mean in a relationship way. Like we
Well,
build relationships. It is a world of relationships. It is an industry of relationships. And when you're in a smaller market, there are fewer people for you to have relationships with, which is the trade-off. But on the other side, the relationships that you do have can be really productive because they really want to invest in you. And so Iowa City has really invested in me. And I don't think I would be the writer that I am today if I didn't have this time in this smaller market. On the other side, nobody's heard of me.
I will disagree with that, but trade-offs is great.
Never mind. James Eldon has heard of me, so I've hit the time.
Please, no. I'm still waiting for this thing to get off the ground after 4 seasons. So here's I want to give the flip side of that coin you just said.
Yeah.
Because it's a phrase that's been used for quite a while, especially in the industry, whether that's Hollywood, whether that's theater, Broadway, whatnot. It's who you know.
Yeah. And
I think that this needs to be rephrased. I started rephrasing it because it's not who you know. And and the thing that bothers me most about that is because that means it's like, it becomes what can you do for me?
Right. That's right.
And
good.
I think that people need to step away from this. That's a very damaging phrase.
Absolutely.
Who you know, because then it becomes like this. I don't want to use the phrase transactional again, because I think this is different, because you start to like, oh, I got to butter people up. I got to do this. So
yeah, so it becomes like a mercenary thing. Yes, absolutely. And 100% agree with you.
What I want people to start walking away with in this regard, and this is the first time I've not announced it, not like I'm like a freaking, oh my God, you're so wise. It's not who you know, it's who knows you. And that's the important thing. Get away from the who you know, because what they can do for you. It's who knows you in an authentic, genuine way. I was lucky enough. You know, I heard that phrase, and again, I'm not tooting my own horn here, people, just so you're aware. When I moved down here, I moved to LA in 2000, and I was a server at a chain called Il Fornaio in Santa Monica. And I commuted from North Hollywood, and that was a 45-minute to an hour commute that just drained me spiritually. I just would talk about road rage. I finally got it. And so I would go, like, I would get done at 5, and the last thing I wanted to do was drive back to the Valley. So I would go next door to Ivy at the Shore. And I was lucky enough to meet a woman named Cherie Henkel. Cherie was the second AD on Seinfeld, and Seinfeld had just ended the year before, in 99. And I had met her at the bar, and she's like, "Oh, I'll help you get your SAG card." I'm like, "Oh, all right, I'll buy it when it happens." And we became friends, you know, hung out every once in a while, you know, but it was like, that's not what this is about. You know, if something happens out of it, great. But I want it to be about the relationship, not about the business.
Yes, that's right.
So I think we met in June of 2000. And come October, I got a phone call, and she said, "Hey, can you do an office scene on the show that I'm doing called The Trouble with Normal?" The Trouble with Normal. It had John Cryer, David Krumholtz, Constance Zimmer, Larry Joe Campbell. And I grew up in the 80s, so being able to be on set with John Cryer was wonderful. I'm like, absolutely, 100%, I could be there. And I worked 2 days and got my first 2 vouchers. Not that this part of the story is important. I can end it there, but the important part of the story is be aware of the opportunities that you're given, because she called a week later, maybe 2 weeks. And she's like, "Hey, can you do another office scene?" And at this point, I was no longer at Il Fornaio. I was actually working at a sushi bar. And I'm like, "No, I can't. I got to work that day." And so and I was afraid to lose that money.
Right.
And so I told my coworker, who was also in the industry, he's like, "What the fuck are you doing? This is the last voucher you needed, and you just totally told that woman you couldn't do it and burnt that bridge. You messed up big time." And that was humbling. And so I had to turn around and say, "I'm sorry. I'm new to this. I don't quite understand it. I apologize. I should have known better." And she was nice enough to still bring me back in. And I got that last voucher. And so within 6 months of being in LA, I was eligible. So again, it's to go back to the same, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And build that work ethic, have humility and have integrity.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It's community, right? I mean, this is how, let's bring it back to Feast for a second. I mean, this is the thing that she realizes in the play is, how do we fight authoritarianism? The answer is we do it together, right?
Yeah.
We have to build community, and that we can't be by ourselves. We can't be isolated on our own. We have to forge bonds with other human beings. That's what we have to do.
Sure.
And when we are in community, things happen.
Yeah.
And if we're trying to, like, get ahead, we're trying to quote unquote make it. That is a real individualist sort of way of thinking about it, as opposed to, I want to build community, which means I'm genuinely interested in people, whether or not they can give me anything. Yeah. And I genuinely want to be neighbors with people, right? Sure. And that is a practice that I think is good for the spirit and good for the soul, good for our democracy, good for everything. And then it just so happens to also be good for our careers, because when opportunity comes up, right, we think, am I going to take a leap with a stranger I don't know, or am I going to go with the person that my friend recommended? Well, I trust my friend. Let's go with that person. I mean, that's just how the whole world spins. The whole world runs on personal referral. So it is incumbent, I think, on all artists, whether you're writers or actors or set designers or whatever, is incumbent on you to not be a jerk, to be a person that other people want to be around, to be a generous and curious person, and to be in community, forge and build and flourish your community. And that's something that people can do in any market. Yeah. You can do that in any market, is build that community. And people rise in circles. Communities is how we come together. You think about the great theater communities like Steppenwolf. You're at the beginning of Steppenwolf, Gary Sinise and Laurie Metcalf and all of them, and how they all kind of came up together. Right. That's how it works. That's how the world spins. Yeah.
Because I mean, if one person has that opportunity, and then whatever circle they're in at that time finds that they need one more person, it's like, do you have anybody? I'm like, absolutely. I have somebody. Then that's when you get that phone call. But I mean, what was it that you said that I was just like, oh, that's interesting, but I'll give it another aspect to that. But if I remember, I'll go back to it. If you're already, do you, I'm going to say recommend, but this is circumstantial, I suppose. Like, hypothetically, would you say it's better to try to conquer the market you're in, if that's a smaller market, or do you recommend, or do you think it's a better approach to move to a market that you can conquer?
I don't know. Yeah. I also don't know in 2025 what conquering a market looks like. I mean, our industry, the theater industry, is there a theater industry, right? Like, we are in such a contraction. We are in such a time of reimagining and rethinking what we're doing as an industry. It's kind of the Wild West right now.
Let me rephrase that instead.
Okay.
Building a market.
Yeah. What's beautiful about playwriting is that nobody can write your play but you.
Right.
Right? Like, I take a writer that I really love, and I'm sure you may love them too, is Wallace Shawn. I love Wallace Shawn's writing, and I could
I would
never
love to
write
get
a
him
Wallace
on.
Shawn play. I could never write a Wallace Shawn play if I lived 1,000 years. I can only write Megan Gogerty plays.
Sure.
But Wallace Shawn, as brilliant as he can't write a Megan Gogerty play. He can only write Wallace Shawn plays. So in that way, we're not really in competition with one another. Like, I'm
Sure.
not actually in competition with any other playwright because only I can write my play. And I believe that we are in an art form where if your new play gets produced, that is good for me because it creates an appetite for
Sure.
new plays, right? And we want that. We want people to get excited about new plays. That's good for me if that happens. So I think that, unlike Hollywood, I don't even know if Hollywood works this way anymore, but like once upon a time,
I don't
an
think
old
Hollywood
studio
knows who they are
system.
anymore.
Yeah, like they could do, what's that line from the producer? What's that line from that Altman movie with Tim? You know what I'm talking about?
The
The
player?
producer? The player. That's what it is. The player where he's like, I can say yes 12 times a year. And so therefore I can't say yes to you. Right. That kind of attitude, right, is really where you're competing for those slots. I don't think that exists in the theater. I really don't. I think that there is so much uncertainty and there's so little money. Let's be real, James. There's so
Yeah.
little money in the theater that therefore any success by anyone is it lifts all boats. And so
Yeah.
therefore we just have to like write our plays and find the people that inspire us and who want to work with us on them and let the chips fall where they may. And maybe that's bad career advice, but I think it's good life advice.
No, I think that right now, and this is, again, sorry guys, because I've said it a million times, so forgive me.
Well, I've never heard it, so say it.
I think especially now,
Yeah.
It's more accessible now than it ever has been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I tell when there's a playwriting workshop that I do for a theater festival called Linnea. And these are kids that are in high school. There's some playwrights. They're all there to perform as well. All their actor friends are there. There's a tech aspect to it. There's people that are directing one acts, whether they're original one acts or they're one acts that are published. Get some money, go crowdfund, run a theater for 2 weeks, and put it on yourself. You guys know people that know lighting, directors, you've got friends that can act, write something, put it up. The good thing about theater is that you have a chance to remake your investment. And so if you're borrowing money, at least you can pay people back. Or, I'll, get some money, I'll put it together if there's, and run a theater for a weekend, especially in those smaller venues. It doesn't have to be, it's reasonable. Well, it used to be, so I think it's more accessible nowadays. And get rid of the gatekeepers, quit waiting for permission.
Yes, absolutely. Quit waiting for permission.
If you
the difference between Hollywood and the difference between film and theater, in 100%. My view, is that film is a product and theater is an event.
100%.
So with that in mind, film is limited by what they can afford, but theater is only limited by what you can convince your audience to imagine.
Which is everything.
Yeah, which is everything. So there's so much more flexibility. There's so much more inventiveness. We're not beholden to anybody. And so you can do plays in your car. You can do plays.
They did that in LA. I don't know if you remember that. I think of Moving Arts or something like that. Anyways, continue.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's fantastic. You can do plays, you can do plays in the food court of the mall till they kick you out. You can do plays anywhere, which is very exciting. I think.
No, there was somebody who was it? There was somebody they did pub plays.
Yeah.
They would
anywhere where you can find an audience, you can do a play.
And that's my thing. It's like, and that's what I say, quit waiting for somebody else to cast you. If there's a role in theater that you want to do, go get the rights to that play, cast yourself, hire some friends.
Yeah.
Put it up.
Absolutely.
Pay for the rights. One other thing, what What do you find that you have to continually teach your students as a playwriting professor? What's that one thing that reoccurs? I'm sure there's got to be something that's like, guys, you should know better than this.
I think, well, here are the stages.
Yeah.
I think when students, like undergraduate students, like when students are first starting to write plays, sometimes you'll see a scene where there'll be two people and they're yelling, and one will be like, "You don't understand. It's because of my father that I'm like this." And then the other one will be like, "No, you don't understand. It's because of my mother that I'm like this." And it feels like an argument, right? It feels like an argument, and yet it's very boring because nothing's actually happening, right? They're not
telling,
actually
not
listening.
showing.
Yeah, they're not listening to one another. They're not changing one another. Nothing is actually happening. They're just, the playwright is like their inner monologue is now the outer monologue. Nothing's actually happening, right? And so for the first lesson that playwrights have to learn, and they learn it trial by error, is they figure out how to make my characters do things rather than just feel things. How do I make them do things? So that's the first thing they have to figure out. Once they figure out, okay, my character is doing things, they want something, they're making changes, those actions are affecting other people around them. Once they figure out how to make their characters do things, then the next level is how do you make your audience feel something? So now it's not actually about the Aristotelian little Freytag's pyramid going up and down, your little character go on an arc. That's all well and good, but those are just tactics about what's happening in the audience, because theater doesn't happen on the stage and it doesn't happen on the page. It happens in the minds of the audience. So what are the questions you can get your audience to ask? What are the mysteries you can get your audience hooked into? What is the journey your audience is taking? That is where plays become transformative. So those are like the three like life cycle of a playwright.
Do you think that the audience is the most important thing to consider?
Oh yeah. Without the audience, you don't have art. You just have a rehearsal for the art.
Sure.
You need the audience there for it to become theater.
What is the biggest thing that your students have taught you?
Oh, so much. I learn so much from my students all the time. We have, I teach in the playwrights workshop at the University of Iowa, and we have these writers come in who are just phenomenal. And even as they're stumbling and fumbling around, even as they're trying to we really encourage them to take big, bold risks, because we're like, look, you're in Iowa City. You're not getting discovered here. So now's your chance to write your really terrible plays, and they just take these giant, big theatrical swings. A million years ago, Jen Silverman was my student, and I had nothing to teach her. All I had to do was make space for Jen's work, because Jen was just trying things out and failing spectacularly in the most wonderful way, and just really, really pushing herself. And now look at her. Here she is, striding the earth of Colossus. She's doing fantastic, right? So what I learned from my students is risk, risk, risk. Be bold in your failures. So when we write with reckless abandon, the thing we are abandoning is our standards.
Sure. So on that note, because you're telling them to take these bold steps and to take risks, it's one thing to write it. So are they getting produced to where they can see if those risks worked?
In our program, we are production-centered department.
Great. No, that's wonderful. And that's why I'm like,
it's all the time.
Yeah. Like I said, it's like you can write it, but not being able to see it, you don't know if it worked.
Yeah.
Or not.
And it also gives them an opportunity to collaborate, right? So it's no longer theoretical. They're like, okay, I wrote a stage direction where a camel swallows the earth. How are we going to actually do it?
Figure it out.
Yeah.
Megan, what are you working on right now?
I have a play that it's called Fair State, which is state fair backwards. And it is the story. It deals with what do we do with our problematic relatives? So there's two parts to it. There is the story of my beautiful, problematic, brilliant, and very dead father and his life story. But it's also about the history of Iowa and the white people when they came to Iowa and how they displaced the indigenous people who were living here. And I'm a sixth generation Iowan through my father's side of the family. And it's like, well, what do I do? What do I do with my problematic alcoholic father? And also, what do I do with my problematic relatives who built the state for me? They built it for me to flourish, and I have, and I'm so grateful to them for this. But they built it on the backs of this displaced people, and what do we do with that? Anyway, so it's kind of through the looking glass in the state of Iowa. I'm really excited about it.
All right.
Yeah, it should be really fun.
Sounds like it. Yeah. Where can people find your work?
Well, I have a lot of plays published through Original Works Publishing.
Great.
And then my stuff that's not yet published, you can find me on New Play Exchange.
Great.
I have a thing, and then you can always find me on my website, which is megangogerty.com. Wonderful.
And finally, are you on the socials?
I am on the socials. I have a Blue Sky account, but I primarily lurk. I have a TikTok account, but I primarily talk about Taylor Swift.
Swiftie. Does that make you a default Chiefs fan?
You know what? I learned about the Chiefs through Taylor Swift. So there you go.
Any other socials? And you want to throw those tags out?
Oh, let's see. Well, what is it?
Or handles?
It's Megan Gogerty at Blue Sky. You think I wouldn't have this memorized, but I don't. Let me look it up. I don't know. It's Megan Gogerty. It's always my name.
Sure.
TikTok is Megan Gogerty, I know. And Blue Sky, I think, is megangogerty.bluesky.com. I don't know. You know how Blue Sky's so weird?
Yeah.
Anyway, you can find me in those places.
Right. We'll throw all that down, and we'll throw a link down to Feast as well, since it's running through April 6th.
Yay!
So, Megan Gogerty, thanks for coming on to this episode of Playwright Spotlight.
What a pleasure, James. Lovely to talk with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this show with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget, Play Noir is coming back, so make sure you send your submission before May 31st. And in the meantime, until we see each other again, keep writing.